Hello there, it's Nick Higham here from nisargayoga.com. I'm joined today by Michael Jenkins, who's just released a new book called The Gift of the Present: How to Experience More Peace, Joy and Happiness Through Present Moment Awareness. So Mike, tell us all about the book.
The book is very short. I mean, it's specifically been written for Kindle as an ebook, and it's really focusing on 4 specific practices to access present moment awareness, or what I'm calling present moment awareness. I know I'm not the only person to use that term. So the book introduces the topic and talks about what I sometimes refer to as the dimension of spirit, which is really pointing to that state of consciousness, or that reality of consciousness in which everything appears. So I've found that these three core practices, and then one kind of additional one, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with, Nick. The first practice that I guide people through is simply accessing presence through noticing silence. So there's a sort of introduction to that section, and then like about sort of 6 or 7 steps in describing the way that I practice that. So it's very simple, but as we know, often the simple things are not necessarily easy, simply because our mind just, can complicate it or get distracted. So I guide people through the process of just simply becoming quiet and still, and first of all, paying attention to whatever sounds are currently present. So, the sound of birds or traffic outside, the ambient sounds in the room. And then once you've noticed those sounds appearing, is to also notice that they're appearing out of the silence. And then as the practice progresses, we then focus our attention predominantly on the silence, noticing that the silence is always there. So when the sound has died and the sound has risen and then ceased, the silence remains. And again, returning our attention to just the simplicity of that silence. And the longer we sit with that, I suggest that people allow the silence to penetrate them deeply. And we're just sitting more and more with just pure, simple silence. And then the next 3 practices are very similar, but using the dimensions of space and then the dimension of stillness. So the stillness one is an interesting one, actually. If you're in sort of any ordinary room, the vast majority of the objects, things on shelves, books, cups, glasses, furniture, and so on, is generally completely still. So it's quite an easy one to practice with. Because there's, we don't often pay attention to it, but it's like the space in the room, isn't it? We don't really, in most of our everyday going about our business, we don't really see or pay attention to space, but it's the most predominant, thing there is, or non-thing that there is. And it's the same with stillness, and these are all things, the silence, the stillness, the space, they're all, dimensions that I think that I believe are linked, and that are a doorway into the stillness and the space and the silence that's already present within us, which I'm saying is the dimension of spirit, or that dimension of non-duality or oneness, or whatever we tend to call it. So that's essentially the contents of the book. And then the 4th practice I've called awareness of awareness, and that's the sort of advanced practice, if you like, that I think that once people have spent a bit of time exploring silence, space and stillness, is that they can turn their attention to the awareness itself. And as I know you already know, that awareness has this curious, it sounds a bit like a word play when people talk about it, but it's incredibly powerful when our own awareness itself turns its attention to its own capacity to be aware in that moment. Something really kind of strong seems to happen, particularly when people experience it for the first time. And it can be very fleeting. I've seen people kind of go, "Oh, what was that?" It's kind of something quite big seems to happen. But the more we investigate that the ability of awareness to look at itself, I find that the sense of that space and that silence and that stillness deepens and becomes more and more profound. So what seems to be happening to me is that kind of global universal awareness, which is everywhere and, sort of omnipresent, it kind of becomes conscious of itself through our own locally individual sense of awareness. So God notices itself through your own eyes and looks back at itself. So a powerful practice that can lead people on that kind of never-ending journey of awakening. So that's basically the book.
Wonderful. Just skimming through it now and came across this lovely little piece. It says, pure presence is not simply a cold and impartial dimension of an impassive observer. It is intimately connected to and involved in what occupies the present moment. There's no separation, right? Even no separation between noise and silence, or stillness and movement.
Yes.
Or a localized sense of I am, or presence, or beingness, or aliveness, and the boundless awareness in which those points of awareness manifest.
Yeah.
Presence might sound mystical, but it really isn't. I tend to use the word I am, or I amness, because even just sitting here now, for me, there's a sense of I am, I exist. Yeah, there's just this undoubtable knowledge that I am, this presence here. And it's not even the presence of the body or the presence of the mind or the sense of me. It's kind of prior to that. So it's the I am. And then obviously from that point comes I am male, I am this, I am that. But it's almost coming back to the I am prior to something getting attached to it and then identity arising. And just to say, nothing wrong with identity and nothing wrong with movement and noise. There is no separation between noise and silence, movement and stillness, me and you. Basically, this is how it seems to manifest in this paradigm. It manifests through identity, through form, through duality, through thoughts and feelings. And it is exactly as it is.
Yes.
Why fight it? And we're not fighting it through trying to induce silence or space or stillness or awareness. We're not fighting it, and it's really not that at all. We're not trying to eradicate anything, not trying to eradicate noise or movement. We're becoming curious and open to you could say the background or the origin of visible form, of knowable concepts.
We don't go into these practices with a view to wipe away any of the sounds or the emotions or the thoughts or any of the stuff that's bothering us. In fact, when we look kind of impartially at things that aren't necessarily a problem, like the sound of the birds or the dog or the plane or the appearance of the objects in the room, is actually to notice that space around them, it's everything is embraced in that dimension. Put it that way. So the dimension of space and silence and stillness and this kind of present moment awareness, the presence that's within us, is to see that actually everything, as you say, is completely embraced by it, and that there is this quality of closeness and warmth to it. So that quote you read about the space and the silence and the openness not being just a cold observer that has no sort of attitude or connection to what we are experiencing, is that discovering that part of the quality of this dimension is unconditional acceptance and unconditional love. And I think that's really important to put that in there. I mean, I probably could have spoken more about that, because I think it's really important. You know, I think I certainly, in my early days of meditating, kind of got a bit lost in the witness state, where, you know, you sort of become a little bit indifferent to you know, human things. You know, you can become a bit dismissive of, you know, all of this stuff as just sort of transient and passing, and, you know, but when we really look, I mean, I take in the book the example of the space around the objects. I mean, it's completely intimate with the objects, you know, and when you really start to look there, like you say, there's actually no separation. The space goes in and through, and literally you can then start to conceptually, at least when you meditate on this, sense that this space in which we're all appearing, it unifies us all. We're all connected through it. And something very powerful happens then when we recognize this connection, is there's this sort of familiarity and intimacy, not only with the world, but with each other through relationships. So I feel that these sorts of practices are very, very helpful to us as human beings in the world. Taking those experiences into a moment of noticing silence or space, or just sitting with awareness, aware of it, it just has this healing quality, which I think is very much connected to that unconditional acceptance.
Totally.
You know, it's incredible. You know what I mean? It's like a parent with a child. You know, when a parent offers a child, you know, unconditional acceptance of its suffering or its problems. You know, however sort of, you know, insignificant they may seem to us adults, you show complete sort of openness and acceptance of their view of the world. It's just incredibly healing, you know.
Yeah.
It really is.
So you say, as we practice more frequently, we may begin to experience a return of discomfort as the light of awareness begins to shine upon everything in our lives. And it really is that. It's like, just to relate it to that metaphor of a parent, a loving parent, an open parent, and a child who needs attention or is suffering in some way. Awareness is that loving parent. Awareness is that open, embracing, that capacity. And it seems that when we shine the light of awareness onto the parts of ourselves that we would rather not have there, whether that's a certain feeling, thought, sensation, memory, or mental image. Often it's really good to start with sensation, isn't it? And energy in the body, I find. And often the energy manifests in the stomach or solar plexus or chest or throat or head or even other parts of the body. To really go into those parts, and we find there's so many layers, and it's like a bundle of experience which creates our sense of who we are. Moving the light of awareness onto that and allowing that light of awareness to very gently unravel and unfold what is there. And whereas once that bundle of experience felt like a demon, felt like some kind of monstrous part of us or part of ourselves that is scary or should be shunned into the dark, that light of darkness welcomes it all and doesn't even try to change it. All it does holds it, and awareness, being enlightening, brings it all into the light, welcomes it all into the light. So there no longer is there that intensity of fear within that bundle of experience.
You know, like you say, initially when people explore these practices, they can experience feelings of bliss and relaxation and softness, and it all feels really, really quite nice. And then as we practice further and the light of awareness grows within us, like I say in the book, it begins to shine on everything. So maybe stuff that we've just not dealt with, suddenly is we're aware of it in a way that we can't go to sleep around it anymore. So if we've got like unresolved pain or suffering or issues that we've just not had the time or inclination to deal with, it's like suddenly they're all in the room and we can't pretend they're not there anymore. So if we've got a problem around addiction to certain substances, or we've got relationship issues that we've kind of been sort of suppressing, it's like the light of awareness suddenly it makes all of that visible. So I think for a time it can feel like we've kind of lost this nice blissful feeling that we were promised through presence and joy and happiness and peace and all that sort of stuff, but actually it's part of the process. I know that you've done a lot of work in this area where, we're keen to sort of communicate to people, going on a journey of awakening is not about becoming this sort of superhuman person that doesn't have any human problems, but rather about, noticing that we're not alone in facing these issues of being alive and what we've gone through. So awakening is not actually for the faint-hearted. I mean, if we're going to shine the light on things, we might have to be prepared to go through some healing. So I say in the book, it might be the time to take certain things to counselling or psychotherapy. It might be the time, to have really open, honest conversations with family members about the past or relationships or whatever. Because I think that once that light has begun to spread within us, you can't really go to sleep again. You can't. It's very hard, I think, to it's a bit like, if you come into your room and there's, I don't know, something that's been spilt on the floor, like kind of knowingly just ignoring it. It's just very hard to do,
There's a quote that said, the Buddha's Dharma didn't teach peace and relaxation. It taught awakening, often rude awakening. And so it's like peace and relaxation are, as you say in the book, are doorways. Silence is a doorway. Space is a doorway. Stillness is a doorway. Awareness of awareness. They're all doorways.
Exactly.
And yet, even though it feels like we want to sort of hang out in, say, silence or stillness, it's like even in that place can materialize all sorts of discomfort. And actually, we need that discomfort. That discomfort is needed. That material, that content is needed to show us another layer of conditioning, which we have very innocently and habitually been denying or repressed somehow or avoiding or just being distracted away from. And actually, that content is the ground of awakening, facilitated by those qualities you list: silence, space, stillness, awareness.
Yes.
But it doesn't always feel completely blissful.
Yeah, no.
Because that light of awareness is sort of inviting you to shine that spiritual flashlight, so to speak, onto those parts which are painful. And so, but actually, I find it's really about not completely about, but some of it is about finding that resilience to be with what is. Really? Oh, I'm actually able to sit with this pain, this discomfort, this anxiety. Oh, so there's enough capacity here to be with that. Oh, right. So I'm not as weak and small as I thought I was. Oh, I can be with this. And so at first it might feel terrifying, that demon, that monster. But as you shine the light of awareness onto it, it takes on a new light, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it softens, it softens, and it gradually dissolves at its own pace.
Yes, I agree. And that's very important. The point you make about noticing that we have this resilience is that what I find, and certainly have said to people in conversations and meetings and so on, is that what's incredible about this discovery of this dimension is that we may still feel that fear of those demons, or that those experiences that have been locked away, or whatever we feel around it. But actually now we can look again and think, well, it's not me alone that does this anymore. There's this dimension within me, which is part of me. And like you say, that wonderful discovery, maybe I'm not so small and weak and insignificant as I once thought, because I never knew there was this dimension within me, and now I do, and I can access it. And whenever I turn, it's there. Whenever I turn to look at it, there it is. So actually, we're no longer, it's almost like I might say, well, yes, if it was just me having to face all of this, I couldn't. But actually, it's not just me. There's something bigger than me here that's part of me.
Yeah, in my book, Living the Life That You Are, I talk about finding or discovering oneness within aloneness.
Yes.
And actually, you can't be alone. What you are is everything. It's that capacity in which it all
one, yeah.
Exactly. So, but yeah, totally beautifully said there. Like, that awareness is so loyal. It's always at hand. It's always here. It's always what you are. And you're never alone with whatever you're facing. It's all about focus, isn't it? Because often our focus is on that bundle of experience that we've described, or a certain thought or a certain part of that experience. And that's who I am. This is who I am. And we kind of create a sense of me out of that, a deficient sense of me out of that.
Yes,
and
yes.
Can you kind of get some space? Can you get some stillness? Can you expand your vision, so to speak, to take in the bigger picture, which is actually boundless, because you're not that little speck within that space. And so that's the at the heart of any spiritual practice, really. It's about these things, it's about getting space, about becoming so we can work with what is. Certainly it's about shining awareness.
Yes. It's like in the book I used the quote, "Be still and know that I am God." And something that struck me about that a few years ago is that it's like we're talking about ourselves. Be still and know that I am God.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Rather than God saying to us, "Be still and know that I am God," is we say to ourselves, "Be still and know that I am God." That this dimension within me is God, or is awareness, or the source of life, the source of everything. And that's so incredibly powerful, because then we recognize that, well, yes, that my identity as a human being includes the being aspect, that there is this being and I am being a human, and the two are interlinked and inseparable. And so I think that's a real profound discovery that, we don't, in essence, what I suppose we're saying is, it's not just this little egocentric me that goes into the frightening dungeon and looks at all of these things. Actually, we do it with that torch, the light of awareness, and something you said about the demons coming up, I had this sort of image, almost like a sort of cartoon image in my mind, that when the light of awareness grows within us, I think, and I suppose this is just my point of view, but I think that light of awareness, it's almost as if it beckons and draws up those hidden aspects of ourselves. It's almost like, and this was the sort of cartoon image I had of these sort of creatures crawling out of the depths toward the light. They're actually attracted towards it. And maybe what they've been longing for, we've kept them in this sort of lower dungeon, but what perhaps they've wanted all along was to just be set free, to come out into the open. And whether that means they dissolve and transmute or transform, or I don't know, I get the sense, actually, any one of those sort of demons, that bundle of experiences or thoughts, actually, in a way, has the ability, a bit like the ugly duckling, to transform into its kind of lighter aspect. So if it's anxiety, it might be sort of misunderstood excitement about living, or whatever. Do you know what I mean by that?
Oh yeah, completely. It's really, you're always like a story change away from freedom.
Yes.
It's a matter of like, how can you, even in a very practical way, you can do this in therapy. Like, can we reframe what you're saying and what you're experiencing? It's not necessarily changing it, but just seeing it in a new light. Yeah. It makes me wonder, you're just describing like these kind of monsters and ghouls and demons kind of coming into the light. And it makes me wonder if like that's why we have, I was going to say practice, but it's not a practice. I wonder if that's why we celebrate Halloween, something about,
probably
that aspect of life which we fear, or which doesn't have a place in life, certainly around death. Death is a weird thing in our society, isn't it? We have a very strange relationship with death, and
definitely
body, the dead bodies and even alive bodies we have.
Yes.
With. But I wonder if it's that sort of just an unconscious attempt to sort of try and invite in that which has been shunned into the darkness, which, as you say, is always asking to come into the light if it's allowed to be, and if awareness can be known to be beckoning. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like in, I think you're probably right. That we have these kind of traditions in our cultures as a way to kind of aid us in looking at the stuff that really scares us. I mean, is it Mexico? They have the Day of the Dead, which apparently it happens at a time of year when all these incredible butterflies or moths or whatever, have this huge migration from the rainforests, and so a lot of those, I suppose, traditions have at their root, perhaps, the activity of looking again at something which we thought was threatening with a fresh perspective.
Yeah, just to quote something else from your new book, just as we kind of come to an end, you say that in essence, the presence of your own being is not at odds with anything. Like the space in the room, it does not argue with the objects that occupy and fill the space. And that's really what we're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I made a video a couple of weeks ago which sort of spoke about this. I think it was talking about the true value of awakening, and rather than becoming, this sort of superhuman being, I believe, and certainly in my own life, the true value has been exactly that we're no longer at odds with anything or arguing with reality. So stuff continues to happen. We do get, we're human beings in a fragile body on a fragile planet, and so stuff's going to happen that's going to challenge us. My parents are going to get sick and die probably in the next 20 years. I'm going to, suffer probably with various different illnesses and ailments and problems and highs and lows. And so it's not about trying to transcend all of that and pretend that it's not happening.
No.
But rather than, these practices and this approach, and if you like, the journey of awakening to that dimension that's already within us, what it gives us in the end is an ability and a capacity, like you say, a capacity to much better navigate the journey of being a human being. So when we're not opposing and resisting what's happening in our lives, we're just going with it and we're responding rather than resisting.
Yeah.
We just sort of, like a sort of skier going down a slalom, we're able to just navigate those twists and turns with a bit more skill.
Yeah, exactly. Really, that's what it is. And and so when we can navigate and there's more stillness and spaciousness, or not more, but it's unveiled, so to speak, because it's always here. Then an opening is then presented into the truth or the heart of what we are. in our truth.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that has profound, it might sound a bit like we're saying, well, really what you get out of this is you just manage your life a bit better, but it's far bigger than that, because, this has massive implications for society, for nations, for politics, for, the way we live as a species on the planet, I would say what we're doing in the world at the moment, in many ways, is not at all skillful. Our use of the resources of the planet and so on. But if this way of being, with less resistance to the sort of man-made stuff in our heads, and a lot of people end up, frankly, in politics because they've sort of powered themselves through some feeling of inadequacy somewhere. So we often end up with megalomaniacs and sociopaths sort of in incredibly powerful positions because of a feeling of inadequacy. Yet those that go into that kind of work and managing the world and our own resources with a feeling of connection and community and that unconditional acceptance, I think we'd be living in a very different world.
Thank you so much for connecting with me today. It's been lovely to catch up and to hear about your new book. So how can listeners find out more about you and get hold of your book?
So my website is heartofpresence.co.uk. The book, The Gift of the Present, is available as a Kindle ebook at the moment, mainly because it's very short, and so it wouldn't be cost effective to have it in print. However, if there's anybody who doesn't have a Kindle or doesn't want to download the Kindle viewer on their computer, I'm happy to send a PDF version. Just email me and I'll send you a link to pay and download.